We got to start in the Big Apple. The New York Knicks, I guess as the prophecy was written a year plus ago, Kemba Walker, not official yet, but finally making his way to his hometown club after time with Boston, a buyout with OKC. Now, like I said, he's going to the Knicks, and they've been busy. Evan Fournier also comes in from the Celtics with a lofty free agent contract, 4 years, $78 million. They re-signed Derrick Rose. There have been other periphery additions as well. So, Matt, let's start with you. How have the odds changed on the DK Sportsbook?
The odds are moving in the Knicks' favor. So they were 100 to 1 to win the next NBA championship for the majority of the offseason prior to free agency starting. And honestly, that just didn't seem high enough because even last year, just for reference, while the Knicks were in the playoffs already, their line to win the championship was still north of 100 to 1, even when they had already made the playoffs. And it's not a foregone conclusion that they'll make it this year. But the line is down to 80 to 1 now with the new additions with Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. So I feel like those players are worth more than the move from 100 down to 80, but maybe the 100 wasn't the right number to begin with. But it is trending in the Knicks' direction, so that's a good sign.
Nick, obviously the Bucks are the champs. We all know how they're built, what they're capable of. The Bulls have been busy, the Heat have been busy, and then, like we said, the Knicks. Realistically, can New York make some noise in that conference?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot went right. With apologies to our friend and colleague, Kenny Ducey, who I believe is on the next segment and is a huge Knicks fan. I think a lot of things went right for the New York Knicks last season. Their best player missed only one regular season game in a season where pretty much every elite player, it felt like, was missing multiple weeks. Julius Randle not only stayed healthy, but also had a career year by far. And, it proved to be maybe a little bit unsustainable when you look at his numbers in the regular season compared to what happened in that 5-game series against Atlanta in round one. So I think the Knicks at best can kind of replicate what they did last year. They're basically bringing back the exact same team. They re-signed Alec Burks. They re-signed Nerlens Noel. You bring in Fournier. That's a fine move. I don't love it. The Kemba Walker move, I think, looks a lot better on paper. I think the story of him coming back to New York is a lot better than it's going to look in practice because Kemba Walker cannot stay healthy. And with the knee issues that he has, it's not something where you just say, oh, he just needs more time to recover. This seems like it's a degenerative type of issue that's just going to get worse and worse as he gets older. So I think when Kemba Walker feels good and is out there, it's going to be a big plus. But I don't really know that you can count on Kemba Walker for more than 55 to 60 games at this point. And you're just, praying and praying that he's healthy during the playoffs, which, to me, that's just a big time if for a team that, even with a healthy Kemba Walker, would you really pick the Knicks over the Bucks? Would you really pick him over the Nets, even the Heat or the Sixers? Probably not.
Guys, I mentioned Chicago. Bulls have been busy signing trade deals to bring in Lonzo Ball as well as DeMar DeRozan. So obviously beefing up that offense. You already have Zach LaVine and Nick Vucevic there. They added our friend Osmo, Alex Baker's doppelganger, Alex Caruso from the Lakers. So he's in the fold as well. So the odds there on the DK Sportsbook, Matt, what have they been doing?
It's pretty similar to the Knicks, actually. And I think this is a kind of the same situation where you have a team that made tangible improvements, but their starting point was that they were vastly overrated. So while they're in playoff contention now and maybe could win a round in the playoffs, the starting point was a team that just was overachieving last year. The Bulls did trade for Nikola Vucevic last year, but it didn't really even seem to help them that much. And there were still a lot of holes on this roster. So they were around 100 to 1 also for much of the offseason. Now they're down to 60, which is a bit ahead of the Knicks. But again, there was a huge gap between these teams and the top contenders in the East. The Brooklyn Nets are plus 220 to win the championship. And then there's a handful of teams in between before you get to the Bulls and Knicks. So these are teams that it seems like made improvements to get themselves into the playoffs. Maybe they're a little bit delusional about how good they are, but for both of them, I think it's pretty likely they can be playoff teams now, but it's going to be a little unreasonable to expect too much more than that.
Nick, do you like these moves?
I do. I think on paper, if the goal is to just get somewhere between the 4th and the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, then the Bulls have absolutely locked themselves into that range. And to be fair, it's not like they could have gone out and got LeBron James or Luka Doncic or Damian Lillard. These were the moves that were on the table for them. And I think they put together the best team that they could, given the circumstances. But the way that the NBA is constructed right now, where you have a defending champion with arguably the best player in the world in Milwaukee, you have a super team in Brooklyn, you have a borderline aging super team in LA, Like, there's a lot of years over the last 20 to 30 NBA seasons where this Bulls team would arguably be the best team in the NBA, but the amount of talent that you have stacked elsewhere kind of knocks this team down a little bit. And even though you like all the pieces individually, like Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, having Patrick Williams, Alex Caruso, Kobe White, those guys coming off your bench, like that all sounds pretty good. But again, when you compare it to what the elite teams have in the NBA, then you kind of realize like, this is maybe a team that could push for 50 wins in the regular season if everything breaks right. But, again, you're not going to pick them over the Nets. You're not going to pick them over the Bucks. I think they're firmly in that, probably the bottom of that second tier with Philly, Miami, Atlanta. They're probably third or fourth in that group.
Guys, most teams in the NBA are concerned with building long term and, obviously having a title window. The Lakers, who won a championship just in 2020, well, their concern is winning right this second. In fact, the NBA's AARP, this club is it's the all 30 and over team, more or less. Clearly, they're already at the head of the snake, have LeBron James. They have added Carmelo Anthony. They brought back Dwight Howard. They've added Russell Westbrook, obviously, in that big sign and trade move with the Washington Wizards, the walking triple-double. We'll see what he does when he comes in. But this is a team with now 6 guys added this offseason who are at least 32 years old. So, Matt, what do the odds makers make of an all-veteran club like this?
So they're the second favorite to win the NBA championship right now. And I'm not sure if I agree with it or not, but I think the telling thing is that the odds just haven't moved very much as a result of all of these offseason acquisitions. The Lakers were somewhere in the neighborhood of plus 450 to plus 500 when the offseason started. Now they're down to plus 380. And I think it's just a highly controversial topic how good of a basketball player Russell Westbrook is. I am a little bit impressed that the Lakers were able to get so many veteran players that are still somewhat decent to join the team around these guys and play for pay cuts. I think Kendrick Nunn in particular, who isn't like the rest of that group, who's much younger, taking less money than he probably otherwise could have gotten. The Lakers did well after this trade because the concern with the Westbrook deal isn't, to me at least, isn't so much that he's not good. It's that now you have 3 highly expensive players and you just have no salary room to fit anyone else. But I think the Lakers did okay, and the odds are giving them a little bit of credit. I think that this is also another situation where you had a team that was a bit overvalued. Bettors actually weren't betting on it, so it's a little curious why the Lakers' odds were so low here, considering they didn't do that well in the playoffs last year. But they are the second favorite behind the Nets. I think maybe that's justified, but I don't think they're that far ahead of the next group.
What do you say, Nick? Is this the team to beat in the West?
I think it is, and it's not necessarily because of what they've done. It's that I don't know that there's another team in the West that got dramatically better. And I think if LeBron and AD are fully healthy, they probably beat the Phoenix Suns in round 1 of last year's playoffs, and we feel completely differently about both of these teams heading into this season. Some of the other borderline contenders in the West, the Clippers obviously are going to be dealing with an absence of Kawhi Leonard for perhaps the entire regular season. Denver missing a key player in Jamal Murray. If the Lakers stay healthy, I think they're absolutely the team to beat. The problem is when you build a team around a bunch of guys who are 35 plus, you're going to have to deal likely with more wear and tear than the average group. So I don't love the Russell Westbrook move at all. In fact, I really dislike it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find another superstar or even a star in this league. Like if you look at the top 30 players, you'd be hard pressed to find a worse fit next to LeBron James than Russell Westbrook. So I think the Lakers set themselves back by acquiring Russell Westbrook, but I think they made up a lot of ground with all the role players that they acquired. I think they knocked it out of the park in terms of bringing in Wayne Ellington, bringing in Kendrick Nunn, bringing in Malik Monk on a minimum deal, even Kent Bazemore, Trevor Ariza, Dwight Howard. Like, these aren't the most exciting names in the world, but they're all going to play big roles, and I think they're all great fits. The question is Westbrook just going to go rogue and kind of destroy all that? And I think that's certainly a possibility.
Matt, hasn't been long since the Warriors were obviously really, really, really good and winning championships left and right. Now they're trying to return to their former glory. Klay Thompson, obviously, still dealing with injuries, hoping to bounce back and have him on the floor again. But this team, after re-upping Steph Curry to his second career $200 million deal, which is just unthinkable, Otto Porter Jr. comes in at the minimum. What are the people on the DK Sportsbook viewing this team at right now?
So this is the team gaining a lot of traction. I think it's the Bucks and the Suns, for obvious reasons, are popular bets to make it and win the finals next year just because they did it already. But the next team after that is Golden State. And I think there's just a lot of buzz around Klay Thompson returning. He's just a player that bettors or basketball fans in general just love to watch and love to root for. And the Warriors weren't good last year, but Steph Curry wasn't particularly healthy throughout the season. And there's this idea that Klay coming back will just kind of fix all their issues. I think that there's some merit to that. Like, this should be a really good team, but you have the Lakers there. You have the Clippers, who once they get Kawhi back will be just as much of a threat in the playoffs as they were last year. Their team is basically exactly the same. So maybe they won't be as good in the regular season, but if assuming they make the playoffs, like, to me, that's the same chance of making the finals as last year. So the idea that the Warriors are now better than the Clippers, that seems a little much, but it's clearly what bettors think. Like, even at this lower line where the Warriors are down to plus 800, you have the Clippers at 2,200, the Suns at 1,600. So the Warriors are half the odds of the reigning Western Conference champions. There's still a lot of popularity for the Warriors bets. So bettors definitely are happy to see Klay Thompson coming back. And even though Golden State didn't do too much, maybe there's an expectation that James Wiseman will take a step forward this year, but there's definitely some optimism for this team.
Nick, we got to move on, but I don't want to insult you. So how about a quick take on the outlook for the Warriors?
I like it. I think I like them a lot better than the Clippers. Obviously, Klay Thompson needs to stay healthy. I don't think there's been quite enough talk about the fact that he's missed 2 straight years with like the 2 most serious injuries possible. So it's not a guarantee that he comes back and looks like himself and plays 75 games. And, with Kawhi, if there's one player who, you don't necessarily trust to come back at any point this year or come back and just be himself, I think it's Kawhi Leonard. I mean, he's missed a ton of time over the last few years. I like the Warriors compared to the Clippers straight up. And I think the Otto Porter addition at the minimum is huge for Golden State because that takes a ton of pressure off of the 2 first-round guys, Kuminga and Moody. If they're not quite ready, now you have someone else to fall back on.